Transition now to our grounding open plenary with Dwaign Tinsdale from Alternatives for Community and Environment, ACE, Bart Westdijk from the New England Grassroots Environment Fund, and Christopher Coes from the U.S. Department of Transportation. And I just need a mic. This conversation will be a quick one. The purpose of it is to really help to ground the conversations over the last day and really thinking about how we meet this moment. When communities first came into New England, in part, it was because of Dwaign. We had no intentions of prioritizing New England as both our first convening and the place that we were going to double down in helping to support Meet This Moment. But Dwaign was like, you can't start anywhere if you don't start in New England. And so we are really excited to partner with ACE in addition to the Grassroots Fund. One of the key components that were shared yesterday is that EPA is making several major investments in this region. One of them is the $10 million Technical Assistance Center that will be announced later on at the end of this year. And then there will be a $50 million Environmental Justice Grant Makers Program that will offer a regranting of $40 million to community-based organizations. We have never seen this amount of money flow into a community or a region. And so a portion of this organizing is around that $50 million, and HRIA is the lead for that. Stacy Cracker's in the room, in addition to ACE in the New England Grassroots Fund, as a few of the folks who have applied to really think about how we meet this moment. While we're not sure who will be the final awardee, whoever it is has to figure out how to re-grant the $40 million to community-based organizations and really thinking about how we meet this moment. So we are in this room to really start to strategize about how we meet this moment. The final grounding here is that the federal government, through President Biden's all of government executive orders around both racial equity and climate, has prioritized an interagency network called the Thriving Communities Network. And Christopher Coes is here representing as a co-chair. The Department of Transportation is one of the leads in addition to EPA. It's 8 agencies that include USDA, HUD, the Housing, Urban, and Development, the Department of Energy, in addition to the U.S. Commerce's EDA and GSA, and really thinking about how we really meet this moment. And so Christopher will be back for lunch to give a little bit of a grounding, but we just really wanted to use this time to have a discussion as we really start to think about later on this afternoon. We are hoping to have an activation session and really think about all of the components that will be necessary for this region to really accelerate the change that's necessary. With that, I will transition to the plenary. And shortly after we have our conversation, we really wanted to kind of go more deep and connect the conversation to place, because ultimately place is going to give context to strategy. And something that we shared explicitly yesterday is that while many of you all may not hold yourselves as the New England region, the federal government does, and that's how a lot of the money flows. But ultimately, we know that it's going to be a state-by-state and community-by-community approach. So we wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity to hear about some of the work that's happening in the city of Providence. Okay. So, Dwaign, when we first started this conversation with you, you were very clear about what was necessary to meet this moment. And I was hoping that you could bring some of the conversations from yesterday's community-based organization conversation, where you started to uplift what groups should be really thinking about in really meeting this moment, including really thinking about what may be necessary for their back house support and strengthening their infrastructure, because many folks are not interested in engaging with the federal government the oversight that's necessary, really thinking about what the bureaucratic nature may be, because people are just literally trying to do the work necessary. And I was hoping that you could just take a moment to share why you feel like this is a critical moment. And we've had a lot of conversations about this is bigger than EJ. This is not a single sector conversation. This is really about growing the movement. And I'm hoping that you can talk a little bit about that as well.
Yes. Hello? Can you hear me? Cool. So, yesterday in our community gathering space, I put a strong emphasis on back office support, especially for neighborhood-based organizations. One of the things that we struggle with as neighborhood-based organizations is managing our finances, our fiscal controls, and that leads to limited growth, limited opportunities, and we can't even say it out loud because a part of it is almost like a little bit of a shame that we are struggling so much in our back office. This is an opportunity to create back office support, both financially, human resources. How do we build out our organizations? Because these opportunities, or this opportunity in particular, is clearly once in a generation. We haven't seen it in the past, and we may not see it in the future. So how do we engage this process? Clearly, it's a certain level of risk and reward, but my analysis is that there's way too many resources that we don't engage. And this is an opportunity to actually bring to the forefront the necessity of back office support for smaller neighborhood-based organizations. So now you don't have to do it by yourself. You don't have to do it alone. You could do it in a cohort. We could learn together. We could struggle together. But we will have organizations that could actually resist and push forward the things that we represent as communities. So this is the drum that I've been beating for the past 5-6 years. I've been an ED of ACE for 6 years. I don't have a fiscal sponsor. I'm responsible for my audits. I know what my 990s feels like. I know the pressure of that reality. And I also see, the value of fiscal sponsors. I see the value. But there's an African proverb that said, if you carry your own water, you count every drop. For us to grow, we need to carry our own water. Inshallah. Thank you.
Thank you. Bart, when we were having a conversation about meeting this moment, something that I want to make sure comes back into the room from yesterday is something that Matt Tejada from EPA elevated, which is that EPA did not have the physical ability to re-grant in the way that is necessary to unlock the billions of dollars that they have. And similarly, when we first came to you to think about applying as part of the Grant Makers program, you were also very clear that you were not interested in meeting this moment. And I just want to uplift both of your voices in this moment, because as we start to talk about millions, billions, it seems very overwhelming for any neighborhood, frontline, grassroots group to even think about this. And one of the places that I think that the New England Grassroots Fund has been very intentional about is more of the smaller organizations that are very much volunteer-based, thinking about how they engage in this moment. And it was one of the reasons why, thanks to Ruth at the Merck Family Foundation, we came to you, and we came back to you and said, we actually do need you in this moment for this region to be able to thrive. So can you speak a little bit to that, and also the role that you see philanthropy could potentially play in meeting this moment? I know later on this afternoon, we'll have many of the presidents and leadership from the philanthropic community present, but I wanted to make sure that we opened up this morning to kind of really reflect on what it may take to really meet this moment for community-based organizations and smaller municipalities and places?
Yeah. Good morning, everybody. My name's Bart. I use he, him pronouns. Drove over from Burlington, Vermont, where I live. And a couple of weeks ago, we were chatting, and indeed, the Grassroots Fund received a number of those emails about the EPA grant program, and I deleted them very quickly because that's just not something that we do. And then we got a phone call from Ruth, and then we were on a Zoom call with Helen and Stephanie, and somehow magically at the end of that Zoom call we said yes, and I still don't really know what kind of mind trick happened there. But it created sort of a pathway where it's like, okay, yeah, we could do this. And I think that's in part Stephanie and Helen that just have that skill to get people to like reflect out loud and raise some questions, but part of it is also just I'll speak for myself, just my own ability to even envision managing something that big. The Grassroots Fund has a budget of $2 million right now. Our granting budget is $1.5 million. We're an organization that's been around for 27 years, and our focus is on those hyper-local neighborhood groups. We do show up in philanthropy in a different way already. There's a lot of barriers, as many of you will know, to accessing funding, a lot of expectations that philanthropy puts out there around having a 501c3, around having a strategic plan and a really clear budget. Those are things the Grassroots Fund does not require. We do not require 501c3s. We grant directly to ad hoc groups, to hyper-local neighborhood-led efforts. So I think that's one of the reasons why Ruth encouraged Stephanie and Helen to reach out to us. But that idea of, do I see the Grassroots Fund as managing a $50 million budget, that was a really, really big step, and it takes some time. And I think it's an interesting piece to kind of sit with in this moment as well. It came up yesterday as well. You know, we're coming out of a period of COVID. Flooding was mentioned even this morning as well. Communities are dealing with real impacts and are stretched. And as Dwain's saying, they don't have a back office to manage some of the pieces that are there. A lot of folks are on the back foot and are reacting to things that are happening. So the idea of, can we vision? Are we able to show up and talk about what we want going forward? That's not always that realistic. And how do we get ourselves to a place where we are able to do that? Which is where I really see the role of philanthropy come in the short term. There's timelines with federal governments. There are expectations and requirements that are not going to change overnight. Philanthropy is able to offer much more flexible capital, is able to offer general operating support, is able to offer multi-year support, which I think a lot of groups really need. In this moment right now, in order to be able to show up in that way of being able to vision, to kind of, for lack of a better term, we just talked about fires, but putting out some of the fires that are in offices in a way that is done, that is aligned with values. Because as much as I agree with Dwaign around we really need to put backbone office pieces in place, I think what I heard yesterday as well is that backbone office needs to look like what our values look like and not like what people are expecting. I'll repeat something I said yesterday that I think for the Grassroots Fund is really important, that in philanthropy in general, the burden of proving that you're trustworthy lies 100% with the applicant. And what does it look like to flip it around and say, philanthropy, federal government, prove to us that you are trustworthy? How are you showing up in a way where we know you have our best interest in heart, that you're truly wanting to co-create, that you're truly wanting to show up in a way where we can actualize our vision, as was said yesterday as well, for 7 generations going forward? And where we're not put in a place where we have to show up with a 501c3 or in ways that we don't necessarily want to be organizing going forward. So in the short term, I see philanthropy's role as, y'all, you got to show up now. We need dollars now, and not a $10,000 or $5,000 grant, but really serious money so that we can build out capacity to truly meet this moment, to truly meet this once-in-a-generational opportunity for $4 trillion that is going around, and for Region 1 to also just be an example for other regions of what can happen when we truly center community voice on the terms of community organizers. That opportunity is there. That's why we're here, and I'm looking forward to conversations this afternoon to actualize it.
Yeah. Later on this afternoon, we will have a philanthropic session that hopefully allows for the veil to come down in terms of how you engage philanthropy What does that mean? The work that's happening this morning, one of the plenary sessions, or one of the breakout sessions, will also unpack a little bit of that $4 trillion that we're talking about. But Christopher, I wanted to bring your voice into space before we wrap this panel to really talk about something that came up yesterday, which was around the fast, slow, which is that we have to hurry up very quickly and apply for these grant applications, and not in ideal relationship terms where we have to quickly figure out who can be partners on an application and then slowly wait to hear back from the federal government. Something that was beautiful about what Matt uplifted yesterday is that there will be a $2 billion community change grant from EPA that will give community-based organizations the opportunity to apply for $10 to $20 million from the federal government, unheard of. And if you don't get it the first time, they will allow you to reapply and give you feedback on your application, which is pretty powerful. But Christopher, I was really hoping that you could speak to how you're seeing the federal government in really meeting this moment. This was your vision in a lot of ways to really bring this conversation that has been happening in DC at headquarters to the region. And I know that we have a lot of regional offices represented. And it's the first time that they actually have been in the room together across agencies to have this conversation. As a former Obama alum on my side of things, I can remember a lot of our place-based initiatives. And many of those initiatives were actually focused on a project, not a community. And this is the first time that we're seeing a new orientation around community and not necessarily just projects. And so I was hoping that you could uplift a little bit of that vision, knowing that you'll talk a little bit more during lunchtime.
Thank you, Stephanie. First, good morning. I just want to thank both Stephanie and Helen and Communities First and all of the sponsors for allowing me to be in space with all of you. Again, I am Christopher Coes. I'm currently serving as the Assistant Secretary for Transportation Policy, but also the co-chair of the larger interagency Thriving Communities Network. And I will just say, just about a year ago almost, I went to Helen and Stephanie and said, we got to get out of headquarters. We have to go talk to the people. And looking now as this being the first of what hopefully will be many conversations, I think the vision was right. And the reason why I say that, you asked about this tension about fast, slow. Even among this panel, there is like this trepidation that there's so much money, we're not ready for it, we don't have our stuff together. I just want to just ground us a little bit in that you are this moment that we're sitting in, the resources that are around us, the level of radical imagination that you're all having in either your own organizations, as a region, the challenging conversations, the trust-building exercises you're having between community groups trying to re-engage with philanthropy and community groups now trying to engage with their local governments, state governments, and now even federal government, is a representation of what you've been doing and what you've been a part of, not in just the last year, 3 years of administration, but in many ways for the last 20 years of organizing on the ground. And so I say that to say, when I look back at what I had the opportunity to do with the Secretary, working with the President and with Congress, of actually trying to design this thing, it was because of the things you guys were already doing, the things that you were already advocating for, the things that you're saying, if we had this, it would make our lives better, that actually got us to this moment. And I do not believe, nor do I succumb to this idea that this is a one-shot thing. Largely because having been in the room across multiple aisle for individuals who range the spectrum, there is a universal understanding that America has to reinvest in itself, and we have to prioritize the communities that have been left behind. It sounds different by the people who may say it, but if you be honest with yourself, the Biden administration, we had Justice 40. The previous administration had opportunity zones. The Obama administration had empowerment zone, promise zones. The administration before that had enterprise zones, and the list goes on. We are at a precipice as a country, as a people, that in order for us to move into the 21st century, that is more equitable, that is sustainable, and actually ensures that all of us in this room, that those who we represent, and those who are not in this room that we hope to invite in, can live in not only a country or a neighborhood, but in a world that is truly going to be here for 7 generations. So I hope I offer this moment of let's not have that level of anxiety and urgency. Know that you're part of a larger movement. And I see from my vantage point that it's quite sustainable, but this is also the reality check. So yes, one of the unfortunate elements about the moment that we're in right now, we spent a lot of time, all of us, convincing our colleagues, our folks on Capitol Hill, that we need these resources to clean up the lead out of our pipes, to clean our rivers, to give us more access to affordable housing and transit. In the Department of Transportation, when we were able to get the $660 billion, we recognized that the current system, as designed, in terms of us giving dollars to our state DOTs, to our NPOs, and to our transit agencies, in some cases local governments, is not going to be the only model to meet the president's goal of truly meeting the racial equity and climate crisis. Which is why, in that same conversation, we started this conversation of like, how do we show up? It turns out you have people like myself, Maria Zimmerman, and folks like Stephanie and others who we relied on to say, how do we design this? And every time we heard this one common refrain, you have to center the people. You have to center the community. And what I have found in our work at the Department of Transportation, you're absolutely right. A lot of the focus, a lot of the models on how we deliver, which is one of the reasons why I think we as an agency were successful, is we can deliver a project. But then we also realize, well, what happens if we deliver a place into transformation? What if we can say we went to a community that might have been, quote, designated as a disadvantaged community for whatever the indicators that might be used by an agency or by the local community? What if we create a roadmap out of that disadvantage into transformation? Well, what does that look like? And what we continuously kept coming back to is if we're going to center community, we have to step up another reality. That community can't do this by themselves. Community actually had to be at the table with the local government. Community actually had to be with the consultants who are going to have to design some of these projects. Community is actually going to have to be at the table with philanthropy. And so from our perspective and through the Thriving Communities Initiative at the Department of Transportation, the $25 million we got in FY22, we purposely said, we want to target communities who will actually ask themselves, what do we want to be out of this disadvantage? What is our version of transformation? Who is the team that we need to put together? And that we will fund that capacity. And so we've gotten private sector, we got nonprofits, we got philanthropy to all come in to be capacity builders, but their charge was to support the community and provide them the wraparound services to hopefully give them the back-end infrastructure, to give them the capacity to have long-term discussions about what the gap funding that needs to be made. But that is something that the Department of Transportation doesn't normally do when the community at the center. My hope is that not only the work that we're doing at the Department of Transportation through our Thriving Communities work, the work that EPA and some of our other agencies who have now basically locked in arms with us, that we are demonstrating not only to ourselves that we can build trust amongst each other, we can come to a common vision, we can lead to transformation, but actually more importantly, this was a bill, and for us, this was part of our reauthorization bill back in 2021. We have another one coming up in 2 years. So the work you're doing right now is going to be the same argument someone else who sits in my seat will be able to make to Capitol Hill. You know what? You don't think there's enough people who want, who need these dollars coming to show up in these different models? Well, guess what? Look at this room. And look at the rooms that you'll be creating over the next several months to do that. Now, let me answer the question.
In a minute, because we have
I
to
will.
go to the...
But I had to get that off my chest. It is okay if you're not first in the gate. Let me repeat that. It is okay if you're not first in the gate. And when I say gate, I mean getting the grant funding, right? Getting your application in, because this is multi-year. This is not shovel-ready. We're looking for shovel-worthy. And to have shovel-worthy, you have to do the hard work. You have to actually engage with one another. You have to align around an agenda. And one of the things I want to center that, because that is actually the moment where a lot of the folks who've been advocating are coming through the door, and we need them to be successful. I need them to actually not only get the grant that they've been advocating for the last 10 years with the partnerships, but I also need them to deliver. And if they're delivering, they're going to be the model that you're going to follow. So take the urgency of, hey, I need to go fast. I want you to be smart. The second thing I'll emphasize, though, is that do not, and again, this goes to back to something that Dwaign had said earlier, do not take the deluge or the image that there's so much money and that, in fact, you don't have it, you don't need to still advocate for it. Perfect example, in FY24 right now, our department has been told that we're not going to get any more Thriving Communities funding. Why? Because no one asked for it. So one of the things I remind folks is that while you might be sitting here in a space of a lot of money, your hard work of reminding folks, not only to people in my capacity, but across the country why this work is important, is so critical. And so that's the part where I say you need to move fast on and stay committed to remind folks why this effort is so important. So with that, that's hopefully 1 minute. Thank you.
Well, with that, I just want to thank you all. I hope that I hope that you have so many more questions, so many more thoughts for how we really think about this moment as we really just set the tone. I want to bring up Mayor Smiley from Providence to offer some grounding thoughts. Again, what we wanted to do was offer a continuation of this conversation and how it actually works in place. So with that, Mayor Smiley, I'll welcome you up, and then we'll transition to the next panel as well. Thank you.